In June 2015, suspicious transactions were flagged by the Central Bank of Kenya, triggering internal alarms. They had noticed a series of unusual payments being made from the National Youth Service accounts. Many of these payments were traced to companies receiving large sums in rapid succession, often without clear justification or evidence of services delivered. As the scandal started to unfold, with the millions already lost, all eyes turned to the Ministry of Devolution and its Cabinet Secretary, Waiguru. She publicly claimed that no money had been lost and her party members initially backed her completely. But damaging allegations culminated in a strange twist. The same people who previously defended her suddenly began calling for her to take full responsibility for the theft.
Kiingereza mingi mnazifanyia catwalk hapa around, na ni wazi pesa ya umma imepotea. Mwenye hiyo pesa anasema aliweka kwa gunia. Sasa jameni, kweli dunia hii, we must be honest with ourselves.
Even more surprisingly, Waiguru responded by declaring that she was not the suspected mastermind, but the whistleblower. She accused a powerful cartel linked to a young billionaire at the center of the looting network, claiming the group had allegedly put down 200 million shillings to discredit her and force her out through a coordinated smear campaign. In this episode, we'll take a deep look at the twists and mysteries of the NYS scandal, how the audacious theft was executed, the allegations that linked the CS to the scandal, and the cartel that she blamed for framing her. Be sure to like the video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel for more eye-opening stories from Kenya. In 2013, the Jubilee administration unveiled an ambitious plan to revamp the National Youth Service, expanding recruitment from 3,000 to over 21,000 youth annually, organizing them into squads of national service projects and vocational training. The goal was to instill patriotism and discipline while solving youth unemployment. Under Waiguru's stewardship at the Ministry of Devolution and Planning came the most significant transformation. The NYS annual budget exploded from just 3 to 5 billion to an overwhelming 25 billion, catapulting the ministry into the same budgetary league as traditional heavyweights like health, interior, and education. Enormous sums flowed into a ministry entirely unprepared for the financial avalanche, lacking institutional structures to manage it and operating with minimal oversight. This created the perfect storm for what would unfold next. The first cracks in the system appeared with the controversial removal of NYS Director General Kiplimo Rugut, a respected career civil servant who had run the service competently for years. Media reports claimed that he learned of his transfer via a late-night text message, though Waiguru denies this account. Rugut himself described the dismissal as worse than how some people dismiss a house help.
Even when a mistake has occurred, it needs to be stated so that the removal of an officer is dignified. Not like, as I said, even the house helps who serve our houses, we treat them better when they're exiting our homes.
His unceremonious exit sent shockwaves through Parliament, where Jubilee MP Mithika Linturi quickly filed an impeachment motion against Waiguru with the broad support from other MPs. But the resistance came from within the Jubilee coalition itself, and then something strange happened. The motion collapsed when Linturi mysteriously failed to show up in Parliament. Only years later, in 2022, would he reveal that President Kenyatta had personally summoned him and pressured him to withdraw it.
You see, when a gun is put on your head, and you understand when you have a CEO who is almost a terrorist, then there are many people that cannot withstand the pressure, the intimidation, and the threats.
Sign the letter.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Point of order, Honorable
Yes.
Speaker. Point of order.
Yes, that's it.
Rugut's replacement revealed the next phase of the plan. Nelson Githinji, a former State House controller with executive ties, took over as Director General, but the real power shift came with the appointment of Adan Harake to a position that didn't even exist in the NYS structure. Senior Deputy Director General. This mysterious role handed him sweeping control over finance and administration, and in a move that would come crucial to the coming heist, gave him operational access to the government's payment system, IFMIS. Meanwhile, Principal Secretary Peter Mangiti, the man legally responsible for approving major ministry decisions, found himself increasingly sidelined from the very operations he was supposed to oversee. Mangiti would later testify that while his first year working with Waiguru had been smooth, she gradually began excluding him from key matters, and more troubling, his signature was being used to authorize actions taken in his absence, including Harake's controversial appointment, all on Waiguru's direct instructions.
Harake is no stranger to controversy. His name has previously featured in dubious transactions during the IDPs and Mau Forest evictees resettlement and was interdicted over questionable transactions.
We have it on record as to the reputation of this Harake within the public service.
Yes.
And he's finding his way into such a position at the NYS, especially with that kind of record.
This restructuring coincided perfectly with the government's launch of the Access to Government Procurement Opportunities Framework in 2013, which set aside 30% of state contracts for businesses owned by women, youth, and people with disabilities. The policy's noble goal was to break the grip of established contractors and empower marginalized groups. But savvy insiders quickly realized it had created something else entirely, a golden opportunity to skip competitive procurement by using women or young people as fronts for shell companies. By early 2015, every piece was in place: an unprecedented budget with minimal oversight, key positions filled with the loyalists operating outside the normal chains of command, and a procurement system ripe for exploitation. The machinery was primed, the players positioned, and the heist was about to begin. It all began with one of the most unlikely figures in Kenya's long history of corruption scandals, a hairdresser named Josephine Kabura. She reinvented herself as a businesswoman and will soon find her name at the center of one of the country's most explosive graft cases. The timeline of her involvement, pieced together from her own sworn testimony, traces a remarkable ascent. She first encountered Waiguru in 2012, and by 2014, at the very moment the National Youth Service budget was swelling dramatically, Waiguru had ushered Kabura into the ministry's inner circle. Once inside, Kabura met a cast of key players: Waiguru's aide Betty Maina, Director of Planning Hassan Noor, the newly appointed NYS Senior Deputy Director Aiden Harake, and Mutahi Ngoni. The official goal was to help Kabura understand the tender process. Her explosive affidavit revealed a much more intimate arrangement. Waiguru provided her with a secure phone for private communication and 24 million shillings in cash as seed money delivered by her own sister, Lois Mbarire. Kabura's first big break came through Hassan Noor, who gave her her first local purchased order to supply construction material for the Kibra project. Using the seed money, Kabura and her associates set up a network of shell companies, fronts designed to exploit loopholes in the government's new procurement policy for youth and women. The irony was inescapable. The system used for the theft, IFMIS, the Integrated Financial Management Information System, was the very one Waiguru had helped create and implement while she was its director under Uhuru Kenyatta. The tool, designed to bring transparency to government spending, was now used to commit graft on an unprecedented scale. The method was simple but devastating. Purchase orders for modest amounts were entered into IFMIS, then the figures were inflated, sometimes with the addition of a single zero. In one documented case, a 15.4 million road material order became 154.9 million. Former NYS Director General Nelson Githinji will later confirm that as long as unscrupulous individuals on the other side approved the edited payments, IFMIS wouldn't be able to trigger any alarms.
If an LPO was for 2.4 million and now it has been made, an additional zero has been added to make it 24 million, will this IFMIS system recognize that?
My own observation is that there was a very clear organizational plan, very clear complicity with regard to officers at different stations who knew this was coming in at this level, so they would actually be able to approve without knowledge.
The heist continued with breathtaking precision. Between December 2014 and April 2015, 3 of Kabura's companies collected vast sums through inflated payments. The goods were overpriced, fictitious, or never delivered, yet the money flowed. Auditor General reports will later claim that over 1.5 billion passed through Kabura's accounts alone. Once the funds hit their bank accounts at Family Bank, the final phase began with staggering speed. Cash withdrawals and transfers within hours, sometimes even minutes. Kabura often moved millions in cash in sacks and bags. To put that into perspective, 1 million shillings in cash weighs about 1 kilogram. So moving 20 million is like carrying a 20-liter jerrycan full of water. Kabura admitted to a routine of carrying millions from the bank to a waiting car, where she handed it over with no security.
The money that I mostly withdrew, I was carried using bags, and I would carry a bag at a go.
Which bags, gunias or what? How much could you fit in one bag?
It could fit 10 or 20, depending on the size of the bag.
10 or 20 million?
Yeah.
Chairman, how far were you taking the money?
Within the same building.
To a car or something?
Yes, to a car.
Did you get receipts for these payments?
No, there were no receipts.
The scheme began to unravel amid confusion triggered by a leadership change at the NYS. In February 2015, Aidan Harake was formally made the designated accounting officer, replacing Nelson Githinji. Yet, investigations uncovered a critical irregularity. Harake already had full access to IFMIS even before his official appointment was gazetted on February 20th. This meant he could authorize payments ahead of schedule. And on the very day his appointment took effect, 460 million out of the 791 siphoned was fraudulently paid out.
To note that we managed to stop the theft of 695 million when Mr. Harake was the AIE holder, but the 791 million was stolen when Dr. Githinji was the AIE holder.
You are trying to commend Harake that when he was there all was well, when he was not there everything was wrong. But the facts are that Harake was designated into the system when the bulk of them, in fact, I've made tabulations, and don't doubt my maths because I'm an engineer. I've made tabulations from the time Harake was designated into the system, over 400 million shillings was lost.
The transition ignited a bitter blame game. Waiguru publicly defended Harake and cast suspicion on Githinji, claiming that even after removal, he still retained system access. Githinji fired back, insisting that Harake wielded greater power and answered directly to Waiguru herself.
Attachment G4 indicates he assumed direct jurisdiction over procurement, human resource, finance, and administration. Even though his deployment indicated I was to directly supervise him, the reality is that he was on a direct reporting line to the then CS Waiguru.
By mid-2015, banks were flagging suspicious payouts flowing into dormant accounts. According to Kabura's account, Waiguru called an emergency meeting at her home with Kabura, Harake, and Joseph Mugwanja from the Banking Fraud Investigations Unit. Also present was political consultant Mutahi Ngunyi, whose firm was controversially hired with no tendering process for NYS rebranding. Kabura claimed it was Ngunyi who proposed a cover-up strategy, issue calming public statements, and draft a backdated letter blaming everything on Harake's stolen IFMIS password, so Waiguru could appear as the whistleblower instead of the suspect.
So somebody got into the system, who now we're trying to investigate who it is, and made very many commitments of similar transactions, which we now noticed and therefore asked CID to check. The reason we checked, we wanted it checked because it was not clear who had actually done it. But the good thing is they had not finished the transaction. So that's why we're saying we didn't lose money.
On June 5th, 2015, Anne Waiguru went before the press with that exact plan. She insisted that IFMIS had flagged an attempted theft and that she acted swiftly to stop the fraud before a single shilling was lost. It was a reassuring story, but it wasn't true. Subsequent investigation by DCI, the Auditor General, and Parliament's Public Accounts Committee revealed a big part of the 791 had already been paid out to companies linked to Josephine Kabura. And when auditors widened their review, the total loss swelled far beyond the headline figure, with estimates running to at least 1.8 billion shillings. The pressure became unbearable. Waiguru resigned in November 2015 after resisting for some time, saying she was following her doctor's advice after the strain of constant political attacks. For a brief moment, it looked like she might escape untouched. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission even cleared her of any wrongdoing. But only days later, the storm returned with a vengeance. In February 2016, Josephine Kabura dropped her 16-page affidavit, and it tore apart Waiguru's carefully constructed defense. But instead of retreating, she prepared to fight back. What came next will turn a corruption scandal into a political war, dragging in some of the most powerful political figures in the country. Waiguru's response was bold. Cornered by Kabura's testimony, she went on the offensive, claiming she wasn't the architect of the NYS heist at all. She was the whistleblower, and the real masterminds were part of a cartel linked to businessman Ben Gethi. According to Waiguru, this cartel spent as much as 200 million shillings on a smear campaign to destroy her reputation. She linked Kabura's companies directly to Gethi's network, pointing to money flows into his firm Horizon Enterprises, which Gethi himself had bragged was worth 3 billion shillings.
It has been established and presented in this committee and elsewhere that monies from Kafura have been linked to simultaneous deposits in a company associated with Ben Gethi called Horizon Limited, and similarly, there have been transactions involving Ben Gethi and Josephine Kafura with Senator Kipchumba Murkomen and with Farouk Kibet.
She also produced a memo from Aiden Harake. In it, Harake said Peter Mangiti had personally introduced him to Ben Gethi, calling him a fixer who would show him how things worked in government. Waiguru claimed that when Harake refused to cooperate, pressure ramped up through political channels. She alleged that Senator Kipchumba Murkomen personally visited her office, demanding that frozen IFMIS accounts for his clients linked to Kabura and Gethi be released immediately and investigations to be dropped. Investigators later traced 50 million shillings from those same networks into Murkomen's law firm SMS Advocates. What gave Waiguru's counteroffensive unusual force was that it echoed suspicions already in the public discourse. Months before her affidavit, the late Jacob Juma had taken to social media pointing a finger directly at then Deputy President William Ruto's inner circle. He named Farouk Kibet, Ruto's longtime personal aide, and Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, claiming they worked through the young businessman Ben Gedhi to launder stolen funds. Juma even circulated call log data showing Kibet had made over 150 calls to Gedhi and received around 127 in just 4 days, an intensity of communication that suggested coordination, not just coincidence. The political shockwaves were immediate. Waiguru's counterattack split Jubilee right down the middle, dragging Ruto's closest allies into the scandal months before the 2017 general elections, telling Waiguru to stop the Kizungu Mingi and carry her own cross. His allies, led by Duale and Murkomen, dismissed her as a liar and insisted she was the real mastermind, with Duale even claiming she belongs in committee. President Uhuru Kenyatta later admitted his frustration, saying he had done his best under the Constitution, but the system simply wasn't working.
As Justice Kihara, I've just heard him sitting there saying, I wish that there would be a way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, guilty, innocent, if guilty, charged. Nothing. But yet, I stand accused that the executive is not doing enough. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you want me to do?
A later post by Juma also alleged that the looting was actually done by two separate groups. The technocrat who once told Hussein Mohammed on Citizen TV that she had no interest in elective office now made an audacious pivot straight into politics. With her integrity in question and her career seemingly in ruins, she rebranded herself and sought the Jubilee ticket in Kirinyaga. In 2017, she won the governorship, becoming one of the very first women in Kenya to hold such an office. The irony was stark. The face of one of Kenya's largest corruption scandals had not only survived, but thrived. Any lingering hope that lessons had been learned was shattered in 2018 when the second NYS scandal erupted. This time, the theft was estimated at more than 9 billion shillings, dwarfing the original heist. The details bordered on the absurd. In one instance, 3 members of the Ngirita family received 133 million from NYS in less than 36 hours without supplying a single item. Whether Waiguru's claims about the first scandal were accurate or not, her removal didn't seem to deter the theft from happening. The timing and scale of the second scandal showed that nothing had changed. The looting only grew bolder. The billions lost was staggering, but the greater heist was not just of public funds, it was the theft of the opportunity for Kenya's young population. The losers remained constant, the Kenyan taxpayer and those whose futures were mortgaged to feed the insatiable greed of the political elite that faced no consequences for any of their actions.